to establish a strong connection with the Qur'an before Ramadan even enters. Now, many people, unfortunately, what they do is they wait for the Ramadan to come, and when the month of Ramadan comes, this is when they start reciting the Qur'an. But the problem with this is that the month of the Qur'an, the month of Ramadan, has been given to us to develop this connection with the Qur'an, not to establish the connection with the Qur'an. We have to establish the connection with the Qur'an well before the month of Ramadan. Otherwise, what will happen, the month of Ramadan will come, and we will spend the entire month of Ramadan trying to establish this connection which should have been established a very, very long time ago. Our relationship with the Qur'an should not be restricted to the month of Ramadan. Many people, unfortunately, what they do is, when the month of Ramadan comes, they try to finish as many completions as possible in the month of Ramadan, which is a very noble act of worship. However, this habit of completing the Qur'an, reciting the Qur'an, should be something that we should be doing every single day of our lives. The whole purpose of Ramadan being the month of the Qur'an is that Ramadan, it serves as a boost for us to strengthen our connection with the Qur'an. It shouldn't be the case that as soon as Ramadan has been announced, that we pick up our Qur'ans, we blow the dust off our mushafs, and then we start reciting the Qur'an for 30 days, and as soon as Eid comes, we put the Qur'an on our very, very high shelves, and then we never ever touch the Qur'an throughout the entire year. It should never ever be the case. A true believer is that person who has a very, very strong connection with the Qur'an, and a true believer is that person who a single day does not go past except that he has a look at the Qur'an and that he recites the Qur'an and benefits from the Qur'an. Okay? So this is the first thing. Before we even go into, talking about how to learn the Qur'an and how to memorize the Qur'an, the first thing that we need to understand is the importance of the Qur'an and the importance of having a strong relationship with the Qur'an before even Ramadan comes. Okay? Never ever be from those people who restrict their relationship with the Qur'an to the month of Ramadan only. Okay, that's the first thing. However, when we talk about establishing a connection with the Qur'an, what do we mean? How do we establish this connection with the Qur'an? How do we maintain this connection with the Qur'an? Connection with the Qur'an is made up of three things. Number one, reciting the Qur'an daily. Okay, so every single day in your timetable, you should have a slot in your timetable, whatever time that may be, whether it is after Fajr Salah, whether it is after Isha Salah, before you go to sleep, whenever you're free. Whatever time that may be, you should always allocate a slot. And in that slot, what you should do, you should spend that 20 minutes, that 30 minutes, that 1 hour, even if it may be 5 minutes, reciting the Qur'an and educating yourself regarding the Qur'an. This should be known as the Qur'an slot. Nothing can replace it. Nothing can replace it. You can never ever compromise this slot. Right? So this is the first thing. The second thing that we should do in order to establish a connection with the Qur'an is what we're going to be talking about today, studying the Qur'an. And studying the Qur'an, it comprises of two things. Number one, studying the recitation of the Qur'an, so the art of tajweed. And number two, studying the tafsir of the Qur'an, the commentary of the Qur'an, the interpretation of the Qur'an. That's the second thing. The third thing that a person should do to establish a connection with the Qur'an is pondering over the meanings of the Qur'an and implementing the lessons of the Qur'an. Okay? So these are the three ways that a person from today until the month of Ramadan, which is only roughly 80 to 90 days, by the way. So from now till the month of Ramadan, for the next 80 to 90 days, we need to work on these three things. Okay? Unfortunately, what's happened these days, our mobile phones have replaced the Qur'an. This is the harsh reality. But this is something that unless we don't understand, we won't be able to improve this big defect that we have in our lives, unfortunately. Right? Social media, WhatsApp, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, all of these things, what have they done? They have replaced the Qur'an. Just imagine how we check our phones every couple of minutes to see if someone has messaged us. Imagine we had that connection with the Qur'an. What would the state of our iman be? How strong of a relationship would we have with the Qur'an? We would all be, people who have taqwa, people who have God consciousness. So this is something that is very, very important that we need to think about, right? That how much time am I spending on social media, and am I spending less time or more time with the Qur'an? If you are spending less time with the Qur'an, then this is something that you really need to work on. Listen. So today, inshallah, I'm going to talk about learning the Qur'an in particular. As for the other two, the tafsir of the Qur'an, pondering over the Qur'an, reciting the Qur'an, that's a completely different subject. We're going to concentrate today on how to learn the Qur'an. First of all, learning the Qur'an is something that the Prophet ﷺ, in one hadith, he mentions that خَيْرُكُمْ مَنْ تَعَلَّمَ الْقُرْآنَ وَعَلَّمَهُ, that the best of you are those who study the Qur'an and thereafter they teach the Qur'an. In another narration or another version of this hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, خَيْرُكُمْ مَنْ تَعَلَّمَ الْقُرْآنَ أَوْ عَلَّمَهُ, that the best of you are those who study the Qur'an or teach the Qur'an. So whichever version you want to take, the point that is being mentioned in the hadith is that if you are engaged in studying the Qur'an or teaching the Qur'an, you are the best of all people. Okay? This should serve as a motivation for each and every single Muslim to study the Qur'an, to learn the Qur'an, and to thereafter teach it to other people. This is the most noble deed. Of the most noble deeds that a person can do is to study the Qur'an and thereafter teach the Qur'an. Now the question comes that when it comes to learning the Qur'an, how does one go about learning the Qur'an? Where does a person start? So when it comes to learning the Qur'an, there are 4 aspects. Number 1, this is like the lowest stage, level 1 if you like. To learn how to read Arabic fluently. Okay, to learn the letters. If a person does not know the letters of the Arabic language, then he cannot learn tajweed, obviously. So the first thing a person needs to do is to assess himself that can I read the Arabic language fluently? And when we mean fluently, we mean with the correct pronunciation. Something very, very important. Many people, unfortunately, they recite Surah Al-Fatiha, they recite the verses of the Qur'an, the last 10 surahs of the Qur'an, without pronouncing the letters in the correct way. So for example, in Surah Al-Fatiha, instead of saying Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen with a ha, they say Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Instead of saying Ihdina as-sirat al-mustaqim with a ta, they say Ihdina as-sirat al-mustaqim with a ta. Right? And the examples are many. One thing you need to understand is when you mispronounce a letter in the Arabic language, this has an effect on the meaning. For example, if you say qalb in Arabic, it means hearts. If you say kalb, it means dog. Right? Very subtle difference. One is more powerful than the other. One is qaf, full mouth, the other is kaf, which is empty mouth. But that has a huge difference in the meaning. And there are many, many examples. So this is the first thing. If you cannot recite the Qur'an fluently and you struggle to recite the Qur'an fluently, you shouldn't be thinking about memorization. You shouldn't be thinking about tajweed, the rules of tajweed. The first priority for you is to sort your pronunciation out, number 1, and number 2, to read the Qur'an and the verses of the Qur'an wherever it may be. It could be any random page of the Qur'an. You should be able to pick up the Qur'an and read that in a fairly fluent manner. Okay? Once you have done that, the second level is to learn the rules of tajweed and to apply the rules of tajweed. So when it comes to tajweed, there's 2 parts. You have the theory and you have the practical. The theory is to know the rules. So for example, the rules of ikhfa, the rules of qalqala, the rules of idgham, the rules of this and the rules of that. There's so many different types of rules in tajweed. For those of you who have studied tajweed, you know this. So there's many, many rules of tajweed. They all have their theory. One thing is memorizing the theory, but if you do not apply the theory, then it's of no use. Right? So this is why it's important that you not only learn the rules of tajweed, but you also apply the rules of tajweed in the Qur'an as well. Now once you have reached that stage, so that will take you quite long. That will take you quite long for you to become fluent in the rules of tajweed. You should be at such a level where again you can pick up any verse of the Qur'an, any page of the Qur'an, and you should be able to read those verses or those pages of the Qur'an fluently, number one, and number two, by applying all of the rules of tajweed. Okay? Once you have accomplished this, the third thing now to do is to memorize the Qur'an. Okay? Now this is where you are going on to the higher level, the more advanced levels, right? So, memorization of the Qur'an, we're going to talk about how to memorize the Qur'an in a bit. So this is the third level. Once you have accomplished the memorization of the Qur'an, so whether you memorize the entire Qur'an, or you set a goal for yourself that, you know what, I'm just going to memorize Juz Amma, or I'm going to memorize a few surahs here and there, whatever it may be, once you have reached your goal in terms of memorization, the next thing that you have to do is that you need to read to a teacher and try to get ijazah of that teacher. Right? What is ijazah? Ijazah is like a certificate where it is an official authorization from the teacher that you know the art of tajweed and you can now officially teach it. Okay? This is what ijazah is. Even though it's not a condition for you to teach the Qur'an that you need ijazah, but it's a kind of certificate that you've achieved something in terms of the recitation of the Qur'an. Right. Now when it comes to memorization, how does a person memorize the Qur'an? This is a question that I get asked all the time. I teach many adults Qur'an and Hifz and Tajweed and Arabic, etc. And they all start off their lessons by talking about how do you memorize the Qur'an? So my first question is, or my immediate answer to that question is that, are you at the level where you can memorize the Qur'an first? Okay? If you're not at the level that you can memorize the Qur'an, then you don't need to know the answer right now. You need to focus on your priorities first. When you reach that level, then we'll talk about it. So if you are at the level that you can memorize the Qur'an, how does a person do it? And this is where I suggest you all take notes, because I'm going to be throwing a lot of information at you. Right, so number one, there are three parts when it comes to memorization. You may want to write these terms down. Number one, lesson. Okay, lesson. What we call in Arabic as dars. Okay, dars. Number two, new revision. New revision, which we call in Arabic as al-muraja'a al-ula. And number three, old revision. In Arabic, this is called al-muraja'a al-thaniya. So there are three parts. Now let me explain these three parts. So let's say you have started memorizing the Qur'an. You open up Surah Al-Baqarah. You start from Surah Baqarah, Alif Lam Mim, ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. Right? And your plan is, your teacher, and we're going to talk about picking a teacher, picking a suitable hifz partner. We'll talk about that later. But your teacher allocates 5 verses that you need to memorize for the next lesson. Okay? How do you memorize those verses? What you need to do, you need to memorize each verse by reciting the verse approximately 5 to 10 times, looking inside carefully, right? Once you have recited these verses, or that particular verse 5 to 10 times, and you feel comfortable that you've memorized it, you close the mushaf, and thereafter you repeat those verses of memory another 5 times, okay? Once you have done that, you go to the next verse. The second verse, you do the exact same thing. Once you've done the same thing for the second verse, you join the first 2 verses together, and you recite them collectively, okay, the first verse and the second verse together, you recite them 5 times off by heart, okay? So this is how you start memorizing the Qur'an, and you carry on doing that until you've accomplished all 5 verses. Now you have prepared these 5 verses, you go to your teacher, you recite these verses to your teacher, the teacher will take any mistakes out. That is your first part done, yeah, the lesson, the dars, that is complete. Now what you have to do, you have to, maybe not immediately, because when you start the Qur'an, it's not the second and third part are not applicable straight away. They're applicable after a couple of lessons. What happens then, once you have memorized a set portion of verses and recited those portion of verses to your teacher, the second thing you need to do is the recent verses that you memorized. So say for example, you have memorized 30 verses of Surah Baqarah, and today you gave verses 20 to 30 to your teacher, the first 20 verses which you recited last week, that you memorized last week, you need to recite those 20 verses again to your teacher. Okay? This is called new revision. The reason why it's called new revision is because you recently done them. Right? If you don't do this, what will happen is, when you memorize verses, you'll memorize it, it'll go into your short-term memory. Okay? If you don't transfer whatever you've memorized in your short-term memory to your long-term memory, you're going to forget it. So this is why this new revision is very, very important. Okay, very, very important. Now this new revision, the standard new revision is about 8 to 9 pages. So the last 8 to 9 pages that you have recently memorized, these are the 8 to 9 pages that you have to recite to your teacher. Okay? That's the second thing. The third thing, the most important, which many people unfortunately they lack, and that is old revision. Old revision, we're talking about those verses that you recited 1 month ago, that you recited a long time ago, that you memorized a long time ago, right? It may even be 1 or 2 or many years that you memorized those verses. It's been a long time. Now, old revision, what we call al-muraja'a al-thaniya, this will comprise of, depending on how many juz you have memorized, okay, how many surahs you memorized, this will comprise of approximately half a juz. Okay, everyone understand what juz is, yeah? Half a juz. If not half a juz, the more you memorize, the more you will have to give into your teacher. Okay, so for example, I'm teaching one young girl. She's been memorizing the Qur'an with me for about 4.5 years now. Alhamdulillah, she's reached the 19th juz of the Qur'an. She's memorized 19 juz of the Qur'an so far with me. And because she's memorized so much of the Qur'an, right? More than half of the Qur'an. And she's only got 10 juz left, 11 juz left. What she has to do now, she has to give approximately 2 juz to me every single lesson. Okay? I teach her about 4 times a week. Okay, so that's 8 juz she's giving in every single week. Right? Now, the benefit of doing that is that you will finish many completions of those parts that you have memorized, and that will mean that they will be very, very fresh in your mind. Okay? So this is something very, very important, that you need to make sure that you have a specified portion which you recite to your teacher every single lesson, and your lesson should be as many times as possible. Okay? Once a week is beneficial, but it's not as beneficial as reading to your teacher 3 or 4 times a week. Okay? So this is something very, very important. So does everyone understand these 3 parts? Do you have any questions? Feel free to ask any questions, inshallah. Yeah.
What about reading the translation?
We'll come to translation. I'll talk about translation.
What if that helps you memorize?
It doesn't. I'll be frank with you, it doesn't. Okay, it actually makes it more complicated in a lot of occasions. And I'll give you an example. That there was one scholar who was a master of hadith, a master of all of the Islamic sciences, a big sheikh, right? But he never became a hafiz. And what happened one day, when in his old age he decided, you know what, I want to become a hafiz now. I've done everything, but I haven't memorized the Qur'an. I feel bad about it. So he sat down and started memorizing, but he just couldn't do it. Okay? So someone asked him that, Sheikh, how come you can't memorize the Qur'an? He said that whenever I try to memorize the Qur'an, and when I'm reciting those verses, the meaning of the Qur'an always interrupts the memorization. So I'm thinking so deeply about the meanings and the lessons that we can learn, and all of the fiqh rulings that we can derive from those verses, and all of this and all of that, all of the hadith pertaining to the verses, that I can't concentrate. Okay? And from personal experience, I memorized the Qur'an before I studied the Arabic language. Okay? So I didn't know what I was memorizing. Okay? I had no clue what I was memorizing. I knew a few verses here and there, but I didn't have much of a clue. When now I start reciting the Qur'an and revising the Qur'an, and when I start reciting Taraweeh Salah, for example, and say for example I get stuck and I forget the next verse, I try to be clever sometimes, right, and look at the meaning as, okay, let me try to think let me try to assume what Allah is trying to say. I always mess up, okay? And a lot of people have actually experienced this, that they know the Arabic language, even Arabs, right? They know the Arabic language, and when they start memorizing, they try to memorize based on the translation, okay? but that always tries to interfere with the actual memorization. So I would personally say that the most beneficial way is for you to memorize the Qur'an properly first, and thereafter focus on the translation. Okay? What you should do is, if you have memorized like 10 surahs of the Qur'an, okay, and now you're memorizing other parts of the Qur'an, what you've memorized, that's where you can look at the translation, you can look at the tafsir, etc. Okay? Now I'm not saying there's harm in looking at the translation. There's no harm, but what I have experienced personally is that it can interfere in the memorization process. Okay? But everyone's different, everyone's minds work differently. So this is something that you can experiment for yourself. For some people it does work, okay, but for others it doesn't work. So anyway, so these are the three very, very important parts to memorizing the Qur'an. Okay, so you have the lesson, the new revision, and the old revision. If a person does not maintain these three parts, you will never ever progress in terms of your hifz, in terms of your memorization of the Qur'an. Especially the third part. If you don't concentrate on your old revision, then you're going to forget parts of the Qur'an. Okay? And subhanAllah, there's great punishments and warnings regarding a person who memorizes the Qur'an and due to laziness forgets the Qur'an. Okay, we ask Allah to protect us. Right, so moving on. Some people ask that where do I start memorizing? Okay, should I start from Surah Baqarah? Should I start from the back? Should I start from the middle? Should I start with the surahs that I normally recite in Salah? Okay, what should I memorize? So my advice would be that start memorizing Juz' Am first, okay, the 30th Juz. Memorize that. Once you've got that under your belt, that's when you can maybe start Surah Al-Baqarah, okay, depending on how much time you have, depending on how dedicated you are. And if not Surah Al-Baqarah, you can start memorizing Surah Al-Kahf, Surah Mulk, and the surahs that you should be reciting on a regular basis. Now, the next bit is very, very important. Again, I would suggest that you write this down. What are the ingredients or what qualities does a person need for that person to memorize the Qur'an? Number one, commitment. Okay, very, very important. You need to have commitment. Number two, dedication. Number three, sacrifice. And number four, hard work. Without these four things, if you think you can miss one of these four things out and become a hafiz, carry on dreaming. Okay? Because wallahi, if you're not committed, if you're not dedicated, if you're not willing to sacrifice, and if you're not willing to work hard, then you will never ever memorize the Qur'an, no matter how hard you try. Because you see, one thing we need to understand when talking about the memorization of the Qur'an is that the memorization of the Qur'an is an honor that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives to certain people. Okay? Allah looks at people's intentions, Allah looks at how much effort you put, and based on that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will open the doors for you to memorize the Qur'an. Understand? If you are not willing to put that effort in, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not in need of you. Allah has so many other people that He can use to preserve the Qur'an. Understand? We are in need of memorizing the Qur'an. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not need us to memorize the Qur'an. Allah is far above that. Understand? So this is something very, very important. These four qualities are so important. Commitment. You have to be committed. You have to be dedicated. If you're not committed and dedicated, then there is no chance for you to memorize the Qur'an. Let me give you a classic example. You memorize the Qur'an, and there is a slot in the day that you have assigned that I'm going to use this hour or this 2 hours or however long it may be. I'm going to use it to memorize the Qur'an. And what happens? You get a text from your mate saying, "Listen, we're all linking up. Yeah, we're going out for a meal. Do you want to join us?" Yeah, that's a distraction, right? That's a distraction. A person who's truly committed to memorize the Qur'an, he's saying, "Sorry, I'm busy. Okay, I can't make it tonight." And he will use that hour to memorize the Qur'an. And you know, subhanAllah, from personal experiences, these are the occasions where you'll find the most barakah in memorizing the Qur'an. These are the times where you memorize the most pages with the most ease. When you sacrifice something, when you are committed, and through that commitment, through that sacrifice, you use that time to memorize the Qur'an. These are the most blessed moments. Okay? Another common question when it comes to memorizing the Qur'an is, what time shall I assign? Okay, when should I memorize the Qur'an? Now usually, the best time would be early morning after Fajr Salah, because this is where the mind is free, this is where the mind is fresh, okay? And this is when many people, they memorize the Qur'an. But I would say everyone's different. Some people, they start work very early, straight after Fajr, so there's no time. So I would say that pick a day, pick a time where you feel mentally free and physically free, okay? This is a time where you're free from all of your commitments, and you're also free mentally. You don't have anything to think about, you don't have anything to do, and this is the time that you should pick to memorize the Qur'an. Where should you memorize the Qur'an? Common sense. Don't memorize the Qur'an in a place that you're going to get distracted, right? And I would even say that don't even memorize it at home, okay? Because home is the worst place to memorize the Qur'an. Why? Because there is so much distraction there, so much distraction. The best place would be the masjid, okay? A quiet place where you have to switch your phones off, right? That's step number one. Switch your phones off, put your phones away, right? And thereafter sit for 1 hour without losing focus, memorizing the Qur'an. This is the most difficult thing to do. Wallahi, try it. 1 hour without losing focus. All you're doing is memorizing. Yeah, you're not checking your phones, you're not talking to anyone, you're not looking around, you're not daydreaming, you're not multitasking. Right? When it comes to hifd, there's no such thing as multitasking. Right? Don't say I'm good at multitasking, so I can check my WhatsApp status, right? And I can check my Instagram, this, that, and at the same time I'm memorizing the Qur'an. It doesn't work like that. Okay? You may be good at multitasking, but the Qur'an is not made for multitasking. Okay? So it's something very important. Another advice that I want to give when it comes to the memorization of the Qur'an is that you need to pick a hifd buddy. Yeah? A memorization buddy. Right? This person cannot be your best friend. Condition number one. Okay? He can't be your best friend. Because what's going to happen, you guys are going to meet up and you're going to go out for a meal. Right? But if you don't go out for a meal, you're just going to chit chat and you're just going to talk. You're going to say, oh brother, I want to memorize the Qur'an. Oh, you know, it's so amazing. Have you heard this reciter? And you start watching YouTube videos. Yeah? 1 hour goes past, 2 hours goes past, and you haven't memorized anything. You've talked about how amazing memorization is, but you haven't memorized anything yourself. Okay? Again, this is what we call the deceptions of shaitan. Even though you think that, you know, alhamdulillah, I'm doing something very good, I'm listening to the recitation of the Qur'an. But what shaitan is doing is actually putting a very beautiful covering in front of your eyes. And he's actually preventing you from doing the actual thing that you should be doing. And that is memorizing the Qur'an. Because shaitan does not want you to memorize the Qur'an. Right? So you need to pick a buddy, a friend, not your best friend. Okay, not someone that you hang around with all the time. You need to pick someone who has a couple of qualities. Number one, someone that you're not very tight with. Okay, someone that you're not very tight with. You know him. You know that he's a brother that comes to the masjid, or he's a brother that's part of the ISOC, or he's a brother that that's part of my class, whatever. Right? But you're not very tight with him. Pick that type of person. Okay, why? Because that person will be dedicated. Yeah? You're not going to use that time that you have allocated to waste, to watch videos and to do all of this, to socialize. You need to pick someone who's dedicated. You need to pick someone who has that desire to memorize the Qur'an. And you need to pick someone who is going to encourage you and push you at times where you feel demotivated. Right? So this is why it's important that you pick a hifd buddy, that you memorize the Qur'an with each other. You need to push each other, because what happens is, this journey of memorizing the Qur'an is a very long, tiring journey that seems to never ever end. Right? Just the other day, I was having a discussion with my student, the one who's memorized 19 juz. And she was asking me that, she said, Ustadh, does it get easier after this? Right? So she's reached the 19th juz of the Qur'an now, yeah? And 19th juz, for those of you who have done any memorization, you know that 19th juz is a very difficult juz to memorize, okay? Because there's a lot of similarities in the Qur'an, in that particular juz. So she said that, I'm struggling to memorize this. She said that, will it get easier after this? I said, I'm sorry, but it's not going to get easier, right? The 20th juz is hard, the 21st juz is hard, the 22nd juz is hard, the 23rd juz is hard, the 24th is hard, until you get to juz Am, right? When you get to the 13th juz, that's when you can say that, alhamdulillah, I've reached the finish line now, right? I'm nearly there. But until then, you can't say that, it's getting easier. And this whole journey with any science this is the case, right? If you study the Arabic language, if you study the science of hadith, if you study the science of fiqh, if you study the science of tafsir, every single science, you'd find that it is a very difficult science to study. Okay? There's a lot of challenges that come to your way. And you know why? Let me give you the reason. The wisdom behind this is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He wants to see how much you want what you're trying to achieve. How much you want it. So what is Allah going to do? Allah is going to put various challenges in place, various barriers in place. And Allah is going to see that are you going to give up as soon as you see some type of challenge? We should never be from those people who as soon as we find it a bit difficult, oh, you know what, I can't do it. Okay? So another quality that you may want to add, when we're talking about commitment, dedication, sacrifice, hard work, another quality that you may want to add is that you need to be mentally strong as well. Yeah? You need to be mentally strong. There will be times, and I'm telling you this from personal experience, there will be times where you feel that, you know what, I can't memorize. I feel like giving up. Right? And I'm saying this from personal experience, that when I was memorizing the Qur'an, it took me a very, very long time to memorize the Qur'an. Okay? Just due to my own laziness, my own weakness. Okay? I started memorizing the Qur'an when I was about 12 years old, 11 years old. And at that age, I wasn't really bothered. Okay, my dad, alhamdulillah, I come from a family where a lot of my family, they all alhamdulillah, memorize the Qur'an. So it's kind of a tradition that is in my family, that you have to memorize the Qur'an if you want to be from our family. otherwise you're going to be an outcast. So my dad, he kind of encouraged me to memorize the Qur'an, so I started memorizing. But you know, when we're at that age, everyone's lazy, okay, and we're a bit mischievous. So I didn't memorize it properly. And as the years passed by, GCSEs came, I got busy with school, etc., and I stopped memorizing. And then what happened, because I was a bit mature, that's when I started, you know what, I need to get back to it now. So I memorized around 11 juz when I was doing my GCSEs. But those 11 juz were very, very weak. Okay. So what I did, I sat down one day and I made myself a plan, and I thought, you know what, I need to do this properly, right? So I started doing it properly, and alhamdulillah, I reached the 23rd juz. But even then, you see those three things that I talked about, yeah? Lesson, new revision, old revision, I wasn't maintaining that. Okay, especially old revision. I was really, really slacking. So because I was slacking in old revision, all of the 23 juz that I memorized, I was struggling in that. So what happened? I decided that, you know what, after I completed my studies, I'm going to leave and I'm going to go to a boarding school, and I'm going to stay there for 1 year, and I'm going to memorize the Qur'an properly and revise the Qur'an properly and come out as a person who has memorized the Qur'an completely in a proper manner. And this is what I did. I went to Leicester. I moved to Leicester for 1 year. I enrolled in an institute called Islamic Da'wah Academy in Leicester. And I stayed there for 1 whole year. And in that year, alhamdulillah, I sorted out my whole Qur'an, right? Memorization. I completed the 7 juz that were remaining, and all of the juz that I memorized, okay, they were so weak that I had to kind of re-memorize them again. Alhamdulillah, in 1 year I sorted it all out, right? So it needs dedication. You need to have dedication. Another thing that you need is that you need to pick a good teacher. Yeah, a teacher that is not lazy, a teacher that is dedicated, a teacher. One very, very important quality that you need to look at is that you need to pick a teacher that is more passionate than you when it comes to memorizing the Qur'an. Yeah? When that teacher has more passion than you, that I want to make this student of mine a hafiz or a hafizah, this is when you found the right teacher. Now that is hard to get. Okay? And I'm telling you, as in, I'm not blowing my own trumpet or anything like that, but the reason I'm saying this is because I teach him, and there's so many times where, because I'm very, very busy, right? You can speak to Yahya, yeah, very, very busy at the moment. And even though I'm so busy, I still, these 3 days or 4 days that I teach that girl, whatever happens, right? There's some cases where my entire family go out, right? And I can't go because I have dedicated those 2 or 3 hours teaching that girl. Okay? This is the type of dedication that we're talking about. You can't say, oh, you know what, sorry, I'm a bit busy today, can't make it today. None of this works. Right? If you're going to do that, if you do it once, you're going to do it again. If you do it again, then you're going to do it a third time, and a fourth time, and a fifth time. And what's going to happen? Years are going to pass by, and you're going to get older. Your memory is going to get weak, and you won't be able to memorize the Quran. Okay? So you yourself need to be dedicated, and the teacher that is teaching you needs to be dedicated as well. He needs to have the desire for you to become hafiz more than you have the desire to become hafiz. Right? That's the quality that teacher needs to have. And the last advice that I want to give when it comes to memorizing the Quran, and this is something that many of us it doesn't really occur to many of our minds, and that is to stay away from sin. Yeah? To stay away from sin when memorizing the Quran. Do you know why? Because sin is something that weakens your memory. Yeah? This is why Al-Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah, his teacher, he had many teachers. One of his teachers was Waki' ibn al-Jarrah. Okay, Waki' ibn al-Jarrah. And one day, Imam Shafi'i, he complained to his teacher regarding the weakness of his memory. And he made a few couplets of poetry regarding this. So he said, شكوت إلى وكيع سوء حفظي فأرشدني إلى ترك المعاصي وأخبرني بأن العلم نور وَنُورُ اللَّهِ لَا يُهْدَى لِعَاصِي. He says that I complained to my teacher Waki' regarding the weakness of my memory. So he informed me to abandon sin. Okay? He informed me to abandon sin. And then he explained why abandon sin. What is the link between abandoning sin and weakness of memory? What's the link? So Waki' ibn Jarrah, he said that knowledge is a light from Allah. Knowledge is a light from Allah. And the light of Allah is not given to a person who sins. Okay? If you are doing a noble deed, then how can you disobey Allah? How can you commit a sin? Now one may say that it is human nature to commit sin. Yeah? It is part of our nature that we make mistakes and that we slip up sometimes. When you do slip up, when you do commit a sin, when you make a mistake, then you shouldn't just leave it at that. You should immediately combat that with tawbah, with repentance, and with istighfar, seeking forgiveness in Allah. Right? And what do we mean tawbah? What do we mean by tawbah? There are three conditions of tawbah. Number one, that you have regret and remorse over the sin that you have committed. Number two, you detach yourself from that sin, meaning that you're not committing that sin anymore. And number three, you make firm intention never ever to go back to that sin again. Okay? These are the three conditions of tawbah. So a hafiz or a student of the Qur'an who is trying to memorize the Qur'an, what you need to realize is that you need to, before memorizing the Qur'an, you need to remember that my life needs to change now. Yeah? How I carry myself needs to change. The way I act on the streets needs to change. The way I act with my family members needs to change. The way I use my tongue needs to change. Every aspect of my life needs to change. And this is the advice that I gave to my students. That if you are not improving as you are memorizing the Qur'an, then what you're doing right now is pointless. Because as the Prophet ﷺ said that on the day of Qiyamah, Al-Qur'anu hujjatun laka aw alayk. That the Qur'an will either be a proof for you in your favor on the day of Qiyamah, or it is going to be a proof against you on the day of Qiyamah. Those people who memorize the Qur'an, but yet are not willing to abandon sin, they are not willing to stay away from sin, then what are they doing? They are putting themselves into destruction. And what will shaitan do? Shaitan will make them think that, you know what, I'm doing an excellent deed, right? I'm doing a fantastic job. I'm memorizing the Qur'an, I'm so special. Arrogance will start creeping in the hearts. But he'll never ever turn your attention towards the fact that you're committing so many sins, that your character is still so bad. This is why Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, he says that a person of the Qur'an, or a memorizer of the Qur'an, how is he recognized? He's recognized by the time he spends in the night in Tahajjud Salah reciting the Qur'an. Okay? He is recognized by his silence when everyone is speaking. He is recognized by his crying when everyone else is laughing. This is a person of the Qur'an. He is unique. He stands out. A person thinks, you know what, how can I reach such a stage? If you are true in memorizing the Qur'an, if you have sincerity, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make these things easy for you. Don't think that, you know what, it's not for me, I can't be like that, right? Yesterday I went to Brighton University, and one of the things I told the students is that every single human being has potential, right? Every single Muslim in particular has potential. Has potential to become a hafiz, a memorizer of the Qur'an, has potential to be a great scholar of Islam. Allah has given you all brains, and every single brain has something unique about it. Everyone has got a talent that another person can benefit from. Okay? So first of all, before you even memorize the Qur'an, these are the things that you need to sit down and you need to kind of talk to yourself and consciously tell yourself that, you know what, I need to, number one, change myself, and number two, you know what, I can do it. I've got potential. You need to believe in yourself. If you're not believing in yourself and you're pessimistic all the time, you're not optimistic at all, then you're going to constantly be negative, right? At every stage of memorizing the Qur'an, you'll memorize one or two here and there, you know, one surah here, one surah there, and then you're going to give up. Okay? Another important advice that I want to give is that, and this applies to any science, right? Whatever science you are trying to seek, you will always start off, there will always be like a spark in your heart. Yeah? You'll be so passionate about it, you'll be so excited, right? There'll be a fire in your heart. But what happens? Sometimes fire will either light the way or it will consume you. Yeah? A fire will sometimes serve as a lamp so that you can see the path, or sometimes that fire will consume you. If you're not careful, and if you're not maintaining that passion and that desire that you have, what will happen? You will burn yourself out straight away. And what will happen? You'll be so excited, yeah, you know, I've memorized this juz, I've memorized that juz. Whenever you read salah, you recite verses that you've memorized recently, and you feel so good about, right? I've been through that stage, that's why I'm telling you this, right? The feeling is amazing. You feel like you're on top of the world. But what happens? Because memorizing the Qur'an is a long, long path, a time will come where, you know, you'll slow down. That fire that was burning inside your heart, that will kind of subside eventually. Okay? And what will happen, a time will come where you think, you know what, I can't be bothered now. Right? I can't be bothered, you know, I don't like memorizing the Qur'an. It's too hard. And all of these thoughts are going to start entering the mind. Never ever be like that. Be a person who memorizes the Qur'an in stages. Okay? Pace yourself. Pace yourself. If you memorize like, you know, one juz in one day, or do something silly like that, then what's going to happen? You're going to forget it straight away. Okay? This is not what Islam teaches us. Islam teaches us, you know, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he actually said that أَحَبُّ الْأَعْمَالِ إِلَى اللَّهِ أَدْوَمُهَا وَإِنْ قَلَّ. He said that the most beloved actions to Allah is those actions that are small, that are consistent, even though they may be small. Okay? So this applies to the Qur'an as well. That when you are going through this stage where you're so passionate about it, you need to calm down. Yeah? Calm down and pace yourself. So that fire eventually lasts all the way. Okay. Now moving on, what are the benefits of memorizing the Qur'an? What are the virtues of memorizing the Qur'an? The first, there's many virtues, but I'll mention a couple. The first virtue is that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said in one hadith that يُقَالُ لِصَاحِبِ الْقُرْآنِ, that on the day of Qiyamah, the companion of the Qur'an, meaning one who accompanied the Qur'an in this world, and subhanAllah, when you memorize the Qur'an, you find that you are forced to accompany the Qur'an. You're always with the Qur'an. Yeah? You have to spend hours and hours and hours. You know what the classic hifd class is like? A classic hifd class, if you go to a proper school, right, where they teach hifd full time, they will assign 1.5 or 2 hours in the morning, okay, about 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, 2 hours, and then 3 hours in the evening. Right? That is your classic hifd class. They will have school and everything throughout the whole day, like normal. But before they go to school, they will have 2 hours of class, and after school, they will have another 3 to 4 hours class every single day. This is how people are becoming hafiz till today. Right? If you go to other countries, this is how they're becoming hafiz. Even in this country as well. Understand? So this is another very, very important thing, that when you are memorizing the Qur'an, the benefit is that you are constantly with the Qur'an. Yeah, for 6, 7, sometimes 8 hours a day. SubhanAllah. The Prophet ﷺ, he said that on the day of Qiyamah, this person will be called by Allah, and Allah will say to him, "Iqra," recite, "Wartaqi," and ascend the stages of Jannah, وَرَتِّلْ كَمَا كُنْتَ تُرَتِّلُ فِي الدُّنْيا, and recite the same way you used to recite in this world. فَإِنَّ مَنْزِلَتَكَ عِنْدَ آخِرِ آيَةٍ تَقْرَأُهَا. Your final destination. So while every verse that you're reciting, you're going to be going higher and higher and higher and higher in Jannah. The more you memorize, the higher your status is going to be in Jannah. Right? The Prophet ﷺ, he said that your destination will be the final verse that you recite. If you recited the entire Qur'an, you'll reach the top. If you recited half the Qur'an, you'll only get halfway there. So this should be a motivation for you, that you know what, I want to reach the highest stage of Jannah, and this is why I want to memorize the entire Qur'an. Right? Another status is that if you study the ahadith, if you study the books of fiqh, you'll find that the person who is most worthy of leading salah is the person who has memorized the most Qur'an. Okay? The person who has memorized it. Even that is a virtue in itself. Also the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is using you to preserve the Qur'an. That's a great honor that Allah is giving you. That you are part of that system. Because Allah, He says in the Qur'an that إِنَّا نَحْنُ نَزَّلْنَا الذِّكْرَ وَإِنَّا لَهُ لَحَافِظُونَ. That we have revealed the Qur'an, okay, the reminder, the dhikr, which is referring to the Qur'an. We have revealed the Qur'an, and it is our responsibility to preserve the Qur'an. Allah has created an entire system of preserving the Qur'an to such a stage where, subhanAllah, if today all of the copies of the Qur'an were to be taken away and were to be thrown away, what would happen? The Qur'an will still be preserved in the hearts of human beings. Why? Because there are millions and millions and millions of people who have memorized the Qur'an off by heart. Okay? Who have committed the Qur'an to memory. And from now till Fajr Salah, all of those people will gather and will have another copy of the Qur'an immediately. Okay? This is the benefit of memorizing the Qur'an. What a great honor. And another thing is that on the day of Qiyamah, the Qur'an will come and it will intercede on your behalf. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, اقرأوا القرآن فإنه يأتي يوم القيامة شفيعا لأصحابه. Recite the Qur'an, for indeed on the day of Qiyamah, this Qur'an will come and intercede on your behalf in the court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So these are some of the virtues of memorizing the Qur'an. But the question is, like I mentioned, when we are memorizing the Qur'an, there are going to be stages where you feel demotivated. Okay? It used to happen to me all the time. And this is part of Shaitan's efforts in trying to prevent you from memorizing the Qur'an. Shaitan, this is the last thing that he wants. He dislikes that someone memorizes the Qur'an. Why? Because now, if you act upon that Qur'an, then there is great, great reward for you in store, right? For you on the day of judgment, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to give you great, great rewards. And Shaitan does not want that. Shaitan does not want you to succeed. Once you have memorized the Qur'an, you're halfway there. All you need to do now is learn the Qur'an properly, maintain what you've memorized, and act upon the Qur'an. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will grant you entry into paradise. Shaitan does not want this. So what does Shaitan do? He will start playing with your mind. And he will start putting barriers in front of you. And there will be stages where you will hit roadblocks. And you will find, you know what, I just can't memorize this verse. And there are verses like that. There are verses like that, that you feel that they're so difficult, that sometimes, I still remember, subhanAllah, there was some verses that took me 3, 4, 5 hours to memorize. And what would happen, after those 3, 4, 5 hours, I would memorize them, 2, 3 hours later I'll forget them again. Yeah? Now you tell me, that's demotivating, right? That is really, really demotivating. You think, you know what, I spent 3 or 4 hours trying to memorize these verses, and now I forgot these verses again. Okay? So, one thing you need to understand is that when you reach these points in your journey towards memorizing the Qur'an, this is where you need to turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is something that many students of the Qur'an don't do. They forget the actual purpose, the bigger picture. That when you're memorizing the Qur'an, how often, before you memorize the Qur'an, how often did you pray 2 raka'at of salah and make dua that, oh Allah, make this session of mine easy for me? Imagine you did that. Every single lesson you did that. How much barakah would you have? Now shaitan can't influence you anymore. You know Imam Bukhari rahimahullah. We all know Imam Bukhari, right? Everyone know Imam Bukhari? How many people don't know Imam Bukhari? Don't be shy. Okay, so everyone knows Imam Bukhari. Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, his name was Muhammad ibn Ismail. He was known for his memory. Okay, everyone knows about this. Yeah, his memory was, no one could come near his memory. Absolutely amazing memory. The first dars that he attended, he memorized everything. Right? When we come to our first, lecture, we're so excited with our new notepads and our new pens and our new stationery. We sit down right at the front, okay, at the end of the year, right at the back. You sit right at the front and you start taking notes down and you're so amazed, you're like, wow, right, this is what I'm going to be studying for the next 3 years, but little do you know, after 6 months you're going to be fed up and you want to leave, right? So you're so excited, you have everything in place. Imam Bukhari, when he attended his first lecture, he didn't go with anything, right? No bag, no pens, no notepads, nothing. He just went there, he sat down and he just looked at the teacher. So that his fellow classmates, they were looking at Imam Bukhari from time to time. They were taking notes down and they kept on looking at him. Yeah, kept on looking at him. Now, what is he doing? Right? And what a disrespectful student. Right? Well, who do you think he is? Right? He's like a chief that has come, mashallah, he thinks that he's the boss. So after the dars, what happened? They went to Imam Bukhari and they told him that, oh Muhammad, his name was Muhammad, oh Muhammad, what's wrong with you? Why didn't you take any notes down? What kind of a student are you? Don't you know that you have to take notes down in order for you to maintain what you've memorized or what you've learnt in this dars, in this lesson? So he said, Jazakallah, but I've memorized everything. Right? What did he say? He said, Jazakallah, but I've memorized everything. So they started laughing at him. They're like, get out of here, what do you mean memorized anything? Right? We're talking about a 3-4 hour lecture where the shaykh, he's narrating hadith after hadith after hadith after hadith. Imagine now, I spend the next 3 to 4 hours just narrating a hadith to you. Right? You probably remember 1 or 2 hadith. Oh yeah, he mentioned that one, right? And you quote it, like you misquote it as well, right? You use your own words, right? Oh yeah, I remember you mentioned that one again, misquote it, right? But subhanallah, Imam Bukhari, he said, I've memorized everything. They started laughing. They said, no, you haven't, right? Why are you talking rubbish? He said, no, I have memorized everything. He said, if you don't believe me, test me. They said, okay. So they got their big notes out, yeah? The big folder that you guys have, they got that out, they opened it, they said, go on, start. He started narrating each and every single hadith in order that the shaykh he narrated in class. Not just that, with the chain of narration. The chain of narration meaning who that shaykh was teaching, who he heard it from, who his teacher heard it from, who his teacher heard it from, all the way back to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. An unbroken chain, all the way back to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this is why you see, if you open an Arabic version of Sahih Bukhari, you'll find the whole chain of narration. Say, haddathana this and haddathana this and haddathana this, all the way until, سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. I heard the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam saying this. And there'd be like 10, 11 people in that chain, if not more. Now, for you to memorize one chain, I actually tried it, right? When I was studying Bukhari, I thought, you know what? Let me try it. Wallahi, I could have memorized even one chain of narration. And this is where I thought, subhanAllah, how weak we are, right? These are the people, Imam Bukhari and his colleagues and so many other scholars, not just talking about Imam Bukhari. I'm just giving an example. There's many, countless scholars, right, who are known for their memory. These are people, as some scholars say, that these are people who Allah, it is as if Allah created them just for this purpose, right? To preserve the deen of Allah, nothing else. They were like computers, literally like computers, right? 128 gigabyte, right? Never ever forget anything. So Imam Bukhari, he narrated all of the ahadith, not just the chain of narration, not just the actual narration itself, but he also started mentioning the commentary word for word as the teacher, he commentated on it. To such an extent, his memory was so accurate that the people, his fellow students started correcting their notes. like when you guys listen to lectures, right? And you switch off, or you check your phones, or something's happened, right? And you miss one point, and you think, okay, let me leave it blank. I'll ask my classmate. They had blanks in their notes, right? And when Imam Bukhari was narrating those ahadith, they were like, oh, he said that, did he? Oh, okay, thanks, thank you. Fill in the blanks, right? So this was the memory of Imam Bukhari. But did you know Imam Bukhari was actually born blind? He was born blind. What hope did he have? If someone was to tell him when he was younger, or was to tell his mother that this child is going to grow up and he's going to have one of the most amazing memories, right? He's going to have a photographic memory, and he's going to be one of the greatest scholars of hadith to have ever lived. Yeah, no one, he wouldn't believe you, the mother won't believe you, right? But subhanallah, because of the persistence in dua from his mother every single day used to wake up for tahajjud salah and used to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to restore the eyesight of her beloved son every single day. So what happened? Allah answered the dua. Okay? Imam al-Dhahabi rahimahullah talks about this in his book Siyar wa A'lam al-Nubala. When he talks about Imam Bukhari, he narrates this incident. And he says that one day she saw a dream, and in this dream Ibrahim alayhi salam came. And Ibrahim alayhi salam said to the mother of Imam Bukhari that Allah has loved this persistence in dua of yours. Allah loves this action, that every single day you're waking up, you're making dua, you're begging Allah, you're crying to Allah. Allah loves this. That's why Allah delayed it for you. Allah didn't answer your dua straight away. And this is something we need to understand. We're making dua. So you're making dua that, oh Allah, make my hifz easy for me. Oh Allah, make my memory better. But you still, when you go back to it, you still find it hard. You think, is Allah not listening to me? Never ever think like that. Rather, remember that sometimes Allah is going to delay what you're asking for because Allah wants you to carry on asking. Allah knows that if I answer the dua straight away, you're going to stop asking. And Allah doesn't like that. Allah likes it that you ask Him. It's not like human beings, right? You text someone that you've never talked to for the last 5 years, okay, and you say, salam brother, or salam sister, okay, and the person who received the message, they're like, oh yeah, he probably wants something, that's why he's messaging me. Right? So when you ask someone, people don't like it. This is why one poet said that لا تسألن بني آدم حاجة وسل الذي أبوابه لا تحجب فالناس يغضب, that the people, they get angry if you ask them. Yeah? The people, they get angry when you ask them. However, with Allah, when you ask Him, what happens? He becomes pleased. He becomes happy, subhanAllah. Okay? So ask Allah, ask Allah. So what happened? Ibrahim alayhi salam said that because you kept on doing this, Allah has answered your dua now. And Allah has restored the eyesight of your beloved son. So she woke up. She woke up and she thought, it's just a dream. It could be true. It could not be true as well. How do I know if it's true? But subhanAllah, when she saw her son was shouting, right? Muhammad ibn Ismail was shouting out of happiness that, oh mother, I can see a beautiful face. Right? This is the effect of dua. This is the effect of dua. So what happened? He grew up, and these eyesight that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him, he used this eyesight to memorize thousands and thousands and thousands of ahadith. He actually says that I have memorized 100,000 ahadith. 100,000 ahadith. He said that he's memorized. And like I said, when we say ahadith, we don't just mean the actual text, we mean the chain of narration as well. Right? So this was Imam Bukhari. Imam Bukhari, rahimahullah, do you know what he used to do? The point of me mentioning all of this is that he learned this lesson of dua from his mother. Okay? He learned this lesson of dua from his mother. What he used to do, when he was compiling the book Sahih Bukhari, before he would write any hadith in his book, he used to perform a bath, he used to pray 2 raka'at of salah, and he used to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for tawfiq. And then he used to write that hadith in his book. And do you know how many ahadith are there in Sahih Bukhari? Over 7,000 ahadith. This means that over 7,000 times he prayed 2 raka'at of salah and made dua to Allah. Imagine you do that for every single verse of the Qur'an. Yeah. So this is like your bread and butter. If you're not doing this, and you're concentrating on all of the other aspects of hifz, of memorization, this is when unfortunately you're losing out. And it's very sad to see today that many people, they recite the Qur'an, mashallah, amazing, amazing recitation. They've memorized the Qur'an, they've mastered various, recitations, they've got so many ijazats. But unfortunately, when it comes to a'mal, when it comes to acting upon the Qur'an, when it comes to being humble, they are nowhere to be seen. Okay, many people are like this, unfortunately. Right? When they're out on the streets, their character does not reflect. Their character does not reflect what the Qur'an has been, what the Qur'an has said. The Qur'an talks about not backbiting. He's memorized the verse, yeah? That لا يغتب بعضكم بعضا. Let not some of you backbite others. But what is he doing? He's memorizing this by day, and by night he's backbiting. Does it make any sense? It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. This is why a person, when he memorizes verses like this, the best way to preserve it is by acting upon it. When you act upon it, this is a very strong way of preserving the Qur'an. Okay? So these are the couple of ways that you can stay motivated when it comes to memorizing the Qur'an. Also remembering the status of the Qur'an. The Qur'an is that miracle that will exist until the day of Qiyamah. With every single miracle that Allah has given the prophets, they've all died with the death of the prophets. Yeah? For example, the miracle of Musa alayhi salam, his stick turning into a snake. Yeah? If the stick was still to be here, and if I was to grab hold of that stick and throw it, it's not going to turn into a snake anymore. Right? It's not going to work. Why? Because Musa alayhi salam, he's passed away now. That miracle was only, it came into existence for a certain time only, for a certain purpose only. However, the Qur'an is such a unique miracle of Allah that despite the death of the Prophet ﷺ, thousands of years have gone by, right? Over 1400 years have gone by, yet the Qur'an is exactly the same way as it was. Every single letter, the way it is pronounced, and even every single harakah in the Qur'an has been preserved. This is the miracle of the Qur'an. If this does not motivate you, wallahi, I don't know what is going to motivate you. This is the state of the Qur'an. Okay? And subhanAllah, one thing that's amazing about the Qur'an is that the more you read the Qur'an, the more it increases in beauty. Have you ever thought about this? Has anyone here in this room got bored of Surah Fatiha? Put your hand up right now. Who's the culprit? No one's going to get bored of Surah Fatiha. Even though, right, Allah protect us, but even though the Imam who is reciting, he doesn't read with tajweed, he's got a terrible voice, okay, he doesn't know anything about tajweed, and instead of us enjoying Surah Fatiha, we're like, hurry up, okay. Even then, subhanAllah, the Qur'an is such a thing that we'll never ever get bored of it. Never ever will get bored of it. This is why Imam al-Shatibi, rahimahullah, the famous teacher of tajweed, he's a master in the science of tajweed and qira'at. In his poem, he mentions one amazing couplet. He says that وَخَيْرُ جَلِيسٍ لَا يُمَلُّ حَدِيثُهُ وَتَرْدَادُهُ يَزْدَادُ فِيهِ تَجَمُّلًا. He says the best companion is that companion who you'll never get bored of his speech. The best friend you can have, the best companion you can have, is that companion who, whenever he speaks, no matter how much he speaks, you'll never get bored of it. And the more he repeats his speech, the more it increases him in beauty. Now we all have good mates, right? But I'm sure you don't have a good mate that, he can talk all day and you'll never get bored. Nor will you have a mate that, he'll repeat the same thing and it's going to increase him in beauty. You don't got that friend. So what Imam Shatibi is talking about is the Qur'an. The Qur'an. Yeah? That the more you repeat the Qur'an, the more you recite the Qur'an, even though you have heard Surah Al-Fatiha thousands and thousands, if not millions of times in your life, yeah, you will never ever get bored of Surah Fatiha. You ask a 60-year-old man who has memorized the Qur'an, he will tell you that I've been reading these 30 juz, right, 30 ajza for 60 years of my life, or for 40 years of my life. You ask him, have you ever got bored of it once? He'll say never. Right? If you do this with any other book, you get bored of it straight away. This is the unique thing about the Qur'an. So the best way to stay motivated is to remember points like these. That listen, you're not memorizing any old book. You are memorizing the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You are memorizing the speech of your Creator. And this is a sign that you love Allah. And this is a sign if Allah gives you the ability to memorize the Qur'an, this is a sign that Allah loves you. Because Allah does not allow those people who He hates, Allah does not allow them to memorize the Qur'an. And those people who don't act upon the Qur'an, a time will come where eventually Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will snatch away that blessing that He has given them. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he says that certainly Allah, He raises people through this book. Allah, He raises people through this book. But He also degrades other people through this book. How does Allah degrade people through this book? When a person cannot recite the Qur'an properly, and now he has to lead salah, he feels so embarrassed. He feels degraded. Not just that, but all the ultimate disgrace will be on the day of Qiyamah. When a person, he used to go to conferences, he used to recite in front of the public, he used to lead salah, he used to be called a qari, he used to be called a hafid, he used to be called this and he used to be called that. Right? He used to be known as the world-renowned reciter. Right? Everyone knows him. He is known for his qira'ah. He is known for his memorization. But what will happen? Let's imagine now such a person. On the day of Qiyamah, he finds that every single letter that he recited in this world has all gone down the drain. So you need to ask yourself that, listen, why am I doing this? Why are you memorizing the Qur'an? What's the objective? What is the purpose? The purpose is that you want to show your love to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you want to receive the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the ultimate purpose. And the ultimate purpose is that I want to recite the Qur'an because I want to memorize the Qur'an because I want that whatever verse I've memorized to remind me all the time. So for example, when you are sitting in a gathering where gossip is taking place, right? Chit-chat. There's a lot of chit-chat, gossiping taking place. And you're sitting in that gathering. Backbiting is taking place. Now because you memorize the Qur'an, immediately the verse will come into your mind. وَلَا يَغْتَبْ بَعْضُكُمْ بَعْضًا. Don't backbite each other. And what will you do? You will get up and you will leave. That is a true hafid of the Qur'an. Yeah? An opportunity, right, arises, or a distraction from shaitan arises where there is a chance that you may commit zina. Right? And shaitan has tried to sway you off the straight path. Immediately you remember the verse, وَلَا تَقْرَبُوا الزِّنَا إِنَّهُ كَانَ فَاحِشًا. Don't approach zina. Don't go nowhere near zina. Why? Because it's an evil thing. It's an immoral thing. That's a true hafid of the Qur'an. Understand? So always remember, in your journey to memorizing the Qur'an, you need to remember these very, very important points. What is your ultimate objective? Okay? So inshallah, I want to conclude by saying that all of you in this room, this whole hour and a bit, however long I've been speaking for, has been a waste of time. Right? I'm sorry to tell you guys that you wasted your time and I've wasted my time. If you guys don't go away from here today and don't start your journey of memorizing the Qur'an. And the way to do that is, first, you need to pick a teacher. That's the first thing that you need to do. Pick a teacher. Once you pick that teacher, you tell that teacher that I want you to test me and I want you to tell me where I am. You know those 4 levels that I talked about right at the beginning? Those 4 levels that, reading the Arabic fluently with the correct pronunciation. The second level, learning tajweed, the rules of tajweed and implementing the rules of tajweed. The third level, memorization. And the fourth level, ijazah. You need to see where you are in that scale. Many people, unfortunately, they're on the lowest. Whereas, we should be living in such a society, and there has been societies like this in the past, where the entire society, every single Muslim knows how to recite the Qur'an with tajweed and has committed a portion of the Qur'an to memory. Okay? Every single person should be like this. Every single Muslim should be like this. And you should aspire to be like this, inshallah. Okay? So we ask Allah that Allah gives everyone sitting here the ability to memorize the Qur'an. We ask Allah to make us from the people of the Qur'an. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. Does anyone have any questions?